Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We will go ahead and kick off because we have a lot that we want to cover today, but some people can still be joining as we come in. We are recording, just so you know, and we'll go ahead and get started. First, I want to talk a little bit about SheThrives. The data has revealed that more women than men have actually been impacted by COVID. There are many reasons for this, but regardless of the causes, we know that at Thrive with Mentoring, how critical mentoring is during times of crisis. That's why we've kicked off SheThrives, which is a group mentoring program for COVID impacted women. We have themed courses for specific segments depending on the area of concern. So that could be if you've lost a job, you're managing imposter syndrome or self-confidence, suffering from emotional distress, or trying to start a side hustle. And for each of these areas, we have experts in that area that can frame the conversation and facilitate an intimate group mentoring process. In addition to the deep dive topics I've mentioned, domestic abuse has been linked to the crisis as well. There's increased pressure on families during quarantine, and domestic violence has always gone up whenever families spend more time together. This can be holidays, summer vacations, even things that seem seemingly happy and should be a good time. So you can imagine that when families are spending 24/7 together, it's unfortunately no surprise that the numbers have increased. Here in Basel, I know that we've had to open a new facility to house the huge increase of women who've needed shelter during quarantine. And we've seen similar things throughout the world. So today we're officially kicking off the SheThrives program with this hugely important topic of domestic abuse. Since it can take on so many forms, physical, emotional, financial, and there will be somewhat different nuances depending on the location, we have an amazing panel of women who can help us to address this topic from different perspectives. The flow of today will be that we'll first introduce the panel speakers and give them a few minutes to share their unique perspective and what they've been working on in their country. Then we'll have a panel discussion with some previously identified questions and then open it up for Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout the sessions, please put them in the chat and I'll be monitoring that and can help to facilitate the questions. All right, so let's get started. Our first panel speaker comes to us from Mumbai with a very accomplished history in coaching, leadership development, and change and transformation from companies like Chevron, KPMG, and Abbott Holdings. In addition to her impressive career, Shalini Kamath is passionate about her social work, mentoring women to become board members, and creating awareness about domestic violence in India. Thank you so much for joining us today, Shalini. And I'd like to hand over to you for a little bit more of a detailed introduction and also to take us through some of the underlying reasons for abusive relationships and some suggestions to overcome them.
Thank you. Thanks, Alison, and thank you for having me as part of this discussion. So I just wanted to clarify, I do not run an NGO and I'm not associated with any NGO that deals with domestic violence. We are a group of women. We are all corporate women holding fairly senior jobs in corporate India. And we felt very passionately about this because as we started reading in the papers that domestic violence is increasing against women in India as well, we said there was a need to create awareness about what is awareness and where can women go to in case they are facing difficulties, where do they go to? So what we did as a group of, we are about 10, 12 of us, what we did is we put together a whole compendium of links that people can reach out to city-wise, state-wise, and we started creating awareness on social media, and we've had a very good response. So it's primarily just to help women who are going through this. Interestingly, Alison, data says that 1 in every 3 women goes through some or the other form of abuse. The physical one is easy because you can see it. But the other ones, the emotional, financial, those, it takes women a long time to sometimes even recognize that they are going through abuse. And that's why I thought that I'm going to focus right now on to say, how do we identify that it is abuse, and it is not just because, in today's times when women are independent, they're very vocal. So sometimes the relationship can be, I wouldn't say, can be very argumentative, but that doesn't mean it is abuse, right? So I thought first I'm going to explain to people who are listening in today is how do they identify that they're going through abuse or not. So the first thing that is about abuse is it is not a conflict. It is not an argument or a conflict that happens between two people, two parties, because if it's a conflict, then they can negotiate, they can find a resolution. In abuse, it is one-sided. There is one person that goes through something systematically, and it cannot, there is no resolution to it. You can't sit across and agree and say, okay, from tomorrow there will be no abuse and it will stop. So that's the first one. The second one, the way to recognize it is that there's always a pattern of behavior. So somebody who's abusive is not abusive day in, day out, 24/7. No. There are good periods, there are bad periods. There is ugly, and so it's not a one-off incident that, one-off because of something severe that happened between a relationship. That doesn't mean it's abuse. So it is a pattern. You will recognize that there is this good and then there is this bad. Then again, the good, and there are triggers. Over a period of time, you can figure out to say what triggers this abusive behavior. Is it sometimes alcohol, or is it some kind of a thinking pattern, or is it stress, or is it something? There is a pattern over a period of time that you figure out. But what happens to the individual who's going through this is, that's another way to find out, is they genuinely over a long period of time feel belittled, maybe unwanted. Some of them start feeling, even though they may be very good looking, they start feeling they're ugly. They're not pretty anymore. They just feel that they don't deserve anything better. Their self-esteem, their self-worth, it just plummets down. They start feeling shame. There is a sense of hopelessness that comes in. And when it becomes really consistent over a long period of time, there is a fear that sets in. There's confusion, decision-making, thinking, concentrating on something becomes difficult. So these are some of the ways you can figure out whether you are in an abusive relationship or not. So why would one human being abuse another human being? I mean, what is the need, right? So interestingly, it's a learned behavior. It is not that we are born with it, or it is a flaw in something. No, it's a learned behavior. And there are only two reasons why people do that. First is either they want to oppress somebody in a relationship, or they want to intimidate the other person. So these are the two reasons. And what are the tools that they use? So this is basically, it is to gain control, to have control over that other person. So it can be through power or through intimidation. Why would they do it? Because it gives them some kind of enjoyment, a feeling of satisfaction to having that control on the relationship. Sometimes it could be, as I call it, toxic masculinity. A lot of men, and I wouldn't say that women don't abuse men, they do that as well. But the percentages are so small that I'm not going to focus on that and focus on men abusing women. So a lot of times it is to show superiority, because they want to make their partners feel less valued, of deserving respect in their relationship. Sometimes they've seen it in their families, right? So they've always seen that men have an upper hand and they are the, the patriarchy, as we call it, right? So sometimes it stems from them. Another area that we could call it is some kind of an internalized misogyny. In their experiences earlier, they have had some experience, or they've seen it in the family, whichever way it is, where there is this thinking that sets in, which is a misogynistic behavior that is there. There is some kind of, I wouldn't say hatred, but some kind of a negative feeling towards all women. So it could stem from there. A large part of it is through conditioning. When we are growing up, the messaging that girls get and the messaging that boys get are very different. So from that messaging, they kind of get a feeling. So I have seen it. I don't know about other places, and maybe Tamar and Guddy would join about the cultural differences. But in India, girls right from childhood are told to say that, you know, it's important to marry. In a marriage relationship, it's the women that compromise. It's the women that keep the family together. They are the ones that are the giving. The ones that have to give everything. It's never taught to us as girls to say it's a give and take relationship. We are always taught it's a give relationship. Take is never taught to us, right? Also, there is this whole thing, at least in India, we hear. Whenever you say, you know, this is why is your dad, even with your own father, if you would see him behave in a certain manner, and you would ask the mother to say, why is he behaving like that? You would be told, oh, men are like that only. So in your thinking, it is set in to say, oh, men behave like this. So when your husband does that to you as well, or your brother does that to you as well, you just feel that this is part and parcel of a social setup. It doesn't, you know, bring that idea to say, I am being abused, you know, or this is not right. That doesn't come. Similarly with boys, I mean, they also go through this conditioning. They're told anything that they do says, come on, be a man. You have to support a family, you know. So to support a family means that I am above others because I'm the provider. The minute you become the provider, the others become subservient to you, right? In India, we are even told when they have to look for girls, they're always, you know, when they're looking for a bride for themselves, it's always a few years younger, a little less educated, right? So from the start, the relationship is not at an equal footing. It is not a balanced one, right? Boys are, you know, they say it mockingly, but they do tell them to say, well, if you don't control your wife from day one, then she's going to be ruling over you. You know, so the thinking sets in, and they've seen their fathers control their mothers. They've seen their older brothers control their sisters. So this whole patriarchal structure, conditioning, and a lot of it is also learned these days from popular culture and media. I must say that the media has started showing violence against women fairly openly now. So it becomes a norm to say, oh, if a woman says that, you can just give her a slap, right? So all these things just add on to the why they become more abusive. So how can it be reduced? What can we do that we reduce it? You know, as we always say, you have to go with, you can only reduce or eliminate things if you reduce and eliminate the causes. So the first very big thing that as women, as what we can do is we need to empower ourselves, which means we need to, first of all, just believe in ourselves, have the confidence in our abilities, place a value to our own dignity, to say, no, up till this I can take, but beyond that it goes against my dignity. I will not tolerate beyond that. We don't. We keep continuing with it, right? Sometimes just unlearn a lot of conditioning that we have gone through and grown up with. Even if we need, let's say, a counselor to help us with that, we should not feel, you know, that we shouldn't go to a counselor. I don't know about the rest of the world, but in India, the concept of taking a counselor is a very new phenomenon. Up till now, it was always felt that you're crazy if you go to a counselor. You need some mental challenges that you face that you go to one, right? So it's not. You can take that. The second thing that I feel that as women we can do for ourselves is, no matter how small a job that we do, but we should be financially independent. We should be on our own 2 feet. We should work whatever we can do in our sphere. It could be giving us very little income as well, but the confidence that it brings, and at least then there is an open pathway to say, if ever there is a need, at least that can sustain me, right? So financial independence is very important. I really wish as a nation, as a world, we could create these jobs that are well-paying jobs, because women do a lot of work. It is not that they don't, but they always do the unpaid work. They don't do the highly paid work, sadly, right? So that economic independence is very important. Also, sometimes we see that despite financial independence of women, a lot of them still go through abuse. So it is not necessary that just because you're earning, you will not go through it. And that is maybe because they don't have the emotional strength that is required. They are very emotionally dependent on this individual. You know, as at least our spiritual scriptures say that you were born alone and you're going to die alone. Somehow we lose that emotional strength that says, I am complete in who I am. We just lose that. We start depending on our children, on our parents, on our spouse. We are continuously dependent. If only we can bring that back into us to say, I am complete the way I am. That helps as well. And of course, overall at a societal level, we definitely need to reduce the patriarchal thinking of subjugation of women. I find across the world, I've worked in Africa, I have worked, across the globe. I find most world societies view women as less valuable as men. Men are somehow considered superior. Just today I was watching something and I realized even in a game of chess, you know, the queen is powerful, but the king is infinite. You know, somewhere we have created this whole thing around which is that men are superior. No? And then across homes, we don't treat our sons and daughters equally. So if we start doing that, that would change a lot. Education, providing similar education to our children would help as well. Just sometimes I wonder just the language that we use. And I've been trying to think ever since you had asked me to come on this show, I've been trying to think of to say, whenever we want to really say something bad to someone, a male, we would use I'm sorry to be using such foul language here, but it's in context, right? We will say that MF, motherfucker, son of a bitch. We don't have the male counterpart to it. Why don't we abuse because of your fathers? Why always related to them? And if you look at the connotation of these two words, just imagine what are you telling the person that you can do that? You can actually do that to your own mother. No? So these are the things that we really need to change. I think I have overspent my 10 minutes, so I will let it rest here, Alison, because this can go on and on. These are things that never
it is
end,
such a passionate
right?
topic, right?
Yes,
no, thank you so much. And we will hear more from you, so yes, but
sure.
Thank you so much for the introduction and for giving us some of that perspective. I think it's really helpful. And yes, language is hugely important, right? And sometimes these things just become ingrained and you don't really think about the meanings behind, but I think it's a really good point. Thank you so much. Our second panel speaker that we is coming to us from Israel, and she is the CEO of Women's Spirit. Tamar Schwartz has been bringing the silenced and repressed voices of women in Israel to the center of public attention for over 32 years, also with her social work before Women's Spirit. Women's Spirit is a nonprofit organization that assists women survivors of violence to develop financial independence and occupational security. So it's a perfect segue into this financial independence. Since their founding in 2007, they've assisted over 2,800 women survivors of violence. So welcome, Tamar. I hear you have excellent news for us, and we're excited to hear more about you, your organization, and specifically financial abuse.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here, and I find it very exciting that we are doing this sisterhood gathering all over the world. I have guests from India and from Israel and from other countries, and nothing stop us. Yes, we are from all the universe. And in common we have that we are women and we are fighting for empowering of women. So what could be better than this? Yes, I'm Tamar Schwartz, and I'm 32 years working in social work. I'm a proud social worker, as I always say, of course, feminist, and now 5 years that I'm privileged to be the CEO of Women's Spirit, and I will talk a little bit about the aim of Women's Spirit, and I will connect it also to the inspiring words of Shalini. What you see in India, we have in Israel too. We are considered to be a Western country, but in many perspectives, we are very conservative society. In Israel also, there is a big pressure to get married, to have children, especially, you know, after the Holocaust. Yes, to have more Jews in the world because we were killed in the Holocaust. So there is a big pressure in Israel, a very conservative pressure. And so I will speak of the purpose of Women's Spirit. Women's Spirit was established 13 years ago, and it's an NGO that deals with something that nobody deals in Israel, because we combine together two concepts. One concept, I will call it money or economic status, job, occupational territory, and the other subject is violence. And in Israel, the Ministry of Welfare and the social workers are dealing with these two worlds separately. Or they deal with the women victim of violence, they give her therapy, or they put the women in shelters if they are in danger. This is one. And the second is occupational empowerment that is made in Israel for all the population, people that are in the marginal of the occupation market, I would say. So they don't have job, or they have very simple job and they want to advance themselves. In Israel, you can go into a process which is usually half a year and mostly in group. And they teach you how to write a CV, how to go to an interview, job skills, and so forth. And it's good for most of the population, but women victims of violence, they are PTSD, post-traumatic disorder. They have such a low self-esteem. They don't sleep at night. They are so in surviving mode. If you put them in group and only in group, they don't listen to you. They are so depressed. So what Women's Spirit is doing, our process is long, intensive, and private. The women that come to us, we are with them 2.5 years, every week. They get mentor, volunteer mentor, or volunteer coach. That work with her, first of all, of empowerment. All the words that Shalini told us is for good for us, yes, that the woman will know that she could be independent. She has strengths. She's a diamond, that the dust went on the diamond in the ground, but it's diamond beneath this, all the dust. And of course, we help her to find job and to see what's her vision, what she likes to do, what she wants to do, what she's good at. And also we provide for scholarship to go to university or to go through a course that will give her a job license. And we help her to manage her bank account. We go with her hand in hand to open bank account. We have doctors and professors that don't have private bank accounts because economic control of the husband, this is #1 rule for the violent husband. Sometimes he will not beat physically, but always he will control the bank account. She will have to, oh, I see now Shivanchi is coming now. Hello, my dear friend. Sometimes she is the only one that works, but she gives all the money to her husband. And he controls the bank account. She has to report to him. She cannot do any economic decision by her own. And when she's out of the marriage, even many times she discovered that she has debt, huge debt, and the bad news in Israel, she has to pay it. Even if the husband says, I make the debt, she didn't know about it. if the debts were made during the marriage, she has to pay after they are, even if they are divorced. And so this is the good news that I will speak in a minute. I just want to say in large that we work with women on the private domain, with mentors, volunteer mentors, and we have hundreds of women every year. We are spread from the north to the south of Israel. And the second domain, we are dealing with the comprehensive level. We try to change regulation in the social insurance and in many institutions in Israel, that the barrier, we try to finish the barriers that are being made and stop women victims of violence to progress in their way. And one of the latest news, it's a 48 hours hot news from Israel. It's an item that I worked on 5 years. And now 2 days ago, it was approved in the government, and now it's going to the Knesset. It's the parliament that has to approve this too. It's the law for preventing of economic violence. What we said in this law, and it's not connected to gender. If a woman was the criminal, we want her to be punished too. But in Israel, and I think it's all over the world, 99 of these cases, percentage of these cases are from men against women, not the vice versa. The law says that if a woman, usually a woman, see that she has debt and it's not because of her, she could sue in the court, and the husband is obligated to give the money back. It's his business, it's not her business that he made debt. Of course, she has to prove it, yes, it's not so simple, but at least the law give you the door to go through and to charge for what you are entitled to. Imagine to yourself that the law in Israel against violence, it's only about physical violence. And only in 1988, they put also sexual violence. Before this, if I was raped by a stranger, I could go to the police and to court. But if my husband raped me, I couldn't go to court. This is unbelievable. And this law change it contains also sexual attack in the family, but it didn't contain economic abuse. Now the economic abuse, in the next months, it will be approved in our parliament. Economic abuse, it's violence, like all kinds of violence. So we are very, very happy and proud about it.
Such a great accomplishment. I was so proud of you.
Yeah. Thank you, thank you.
So I think, thank you so much for the introduction and for that amazing news. We really, really appreciate hearing about that. I mean, I think you can see the excitement from everyone on the screen.
Thank you.
It's amazing. And I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about financial abuse and what we can do about that as we go forward. So I did want to introduce our third panel speaker, who comes to us from the UK. She is the CEO of Standing Together, which has been working in the field of domestic abuse for 15 years. Guddy Burnet is also co-founded the Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance in 2014, which is a national initiative to improve the whole housing sector response to domestic abuse. She's a representative of the National Violence Against Women's and Girls Stakeholder Panel, and has spoken at numerous conferences all over the world about her work, including the UK, the US, Canada, Australia, Northern Ireland, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Thank you so much for joining us, Guddy. I'll hand over to you to give us a little bit more information about you, Standing Together, and the importance that community plays in domestic abuse.
Well, first of all, I want to say it's a great privilege to be here and to hear from both of the other panel members. That was incredible. I feel it's lovely to be in a space with amazing women who are all doing things in different parts of the globe, and it just fills me with hope in terms of the progress we can make to actually end domestic abuse, because I'd like to be in a position where I'm actually out of a job. That's my ambition, because we don't need to do it anymore. But sadly, we're a long way off that, but we're getting nearer and nearer. So my background, just so you know who I am, a little bit about myself, I actually started my career as a volunteer. In the UK, we have a national domestic abuse helpline. I was in my final year at university and I was like, oh, I'm going to go and see what this is about. And I think everyone in this room, once your eyes are open to this, you just can't shut them again. And it becomes your passion, your life's work. And actually, you become an activist, a feminist, you know, all of these things in terms of you bring your whole self to work. And that's what I love about doing this work so much. It doesn't feel like a job. It feels like all I ever do is just meet extraordinary women in every day of my life. So what a privilege. And as from a volunteer, I did frontline work and support work in South London. And that was a very different experience because I was a 24-year-old white middle-class girl rocking up in South London where we had huge amounts of diversity. And the women that I worked with there probably taught me more about the world than I'd ever learned before. And, you know, I think, you know, I was there to support them. It was the other way around. It was transactional. It was about the both of us learning from one another. And that's a really humbling and amazing experience. And I've carried that with me wherever I go. The voices that I try and project are all of the thousands of women that I've had the honor of hearing their stories and listening to what they have to say. So standing together, our ambition really echoes what the panel, this isn't a social worker issue, it's not a police issue, this is a whole societal issue, and the only way we're ever going to end domestic abuse is if everyone comes together and says this is not acceptable. And actually, the only way we're really going to stop it is by stopping perpetrators, so the people that are abusive in the first place. Because I think what we've learned in the UK over years is that we spent a lot of time putting people in refuges and shelters, which is important, but we can't continue just to displace women, predominantly women, into refuges and shelters forever. We actually have to stop the abusive behaviour in the first place. So Standing Together's mission is about how we bring communities together to prevent domestic abuse in the first place, respond where we need to in crisis, but also and how we work with children, but because children are hugely impacted by domestic abuse, but also how we then hold perpetrators to account. And we do that in a number of ways. In terms of our multi-agency working, we have these basically monthly meetings, which brings all of the professionals together in one room. So it's our probation, the police, social services, housing, substance misuse, the voluntary agencies, specialist BME organisations, LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender organisations, all to get in a room, because we understand that each person or agency will have differing information about that individual and how they present to the outside world. And without all of the pieces of the jigsaw, you don't get a holistic view of what's happening for the whole family, not just the survivor and the victim. So this gives us an opportunity to share information to try and prevent homicide. So in the UK, 2 women a week are murdered as a result of domestic abuse. And that has not gone down in the whole 15 years that I've been doing this. And that also demonstrates that we're not doing things right, and we need to be constantly reflecting and criticising our own practice about what we could be doing better, because if the rates aren't going down, there's something that we need to do different. And within those Marriott meetings, we're able to, with the survivor's voice at the centre, because like Shalini said, you know, the survivor knows their situation better than anyone. No professional can pretend that they have the lived experience or understanding of what's happening in that family. And so we really have to keep the survivor's voice central in this, because they're strong, they're powerful, they're courageous, they know what they need in order to support them, and we really have to listen to them and not use our own judgment to think that we know what's best. And that is really, really key, and it's something that I've reflected on my whole career about whether I've been doing that. Am I really listening to that person, or am I thinking I know best for that person? And we shouldn't have that professional arrogance that we think that we know best all the time, because we don't. And there'll be different cultural implications. It's like survivors are on a spectrum of need. Some of them need a little bit of support, potentially accessing the private rented sector. Some need full wraparound refuge support, right? Some people need enhanced security in their homes, and they'd be absolutely fine to stay there, and some counselling and some support around that. Perpetrators are also on a spectrum of dangerousness. Some, you literally put them, you know, if you get an injunction or an order to stop them, because they've got a really good job, that's going to damage their reputation, they'll stick to that order. Other perpetrators that have got a huge criminal history and do not give a damn, you put an injunction on them, they're going to come for you and they'll kill you. So you have to understand the nuances between different people, and therefore make sure that your response is tailored to those individual needs. And I think in the UK, we do a pretty good job at trying to do that in the Marat context. So that's what that is. In terms of housing, we do some amazing work. So rather than think about shelter and refuge, 70% of the people living in this country live in the private rented sector or owner-occupier. They're not in social housing, is what we call it here. So what conversations are we having with those bodies to say your landlords, your letting agents, all should be trained on domestic abuse? I worked at a housing association for 10 years, Peabody. When I started there, we had 4 cases reported to us across 27,000 properties. We did training, we rewrote our policies and procedures, went out there. And as a result of that, our identification of domestic abuse went up by 1,425%. And we got a case reported to us every 3 days. That's the sort of impact you can have in terms of institutional change. And within Peabody, one of the big things as well was training our contractors. Gas engineers have to get into every single property by law in this country, in the UK. What an opportunity to get to those people that really are so isolated that they are behind closed doors. No one sees them. No one in the house, no one in the GP, you know, they don't actually get out of the house. But those contractors might see a punch mark in a wall. They might see that there's a lock on an inside door that shouldn't be there. And they use their professional curiosity as a flag to hang on, there might be something not right here, I'm going to report it back. And at Peabody, we had so many people come forward and say that, and we were then able to intervene and support those people into safety, and just from one call from a gas engineer. And that's how amazing this work can be if you think bigger than just thinking about refuge or shelter or all the rest of it. We also know in the UK that 80% of our come in a health setting. So maternity, when you're pregnant, you're most at risk of physical violence during pregnancy. It's a known fact. And that is also about the loss of power and control that the perpetrator has. So they will go straight for your stomach. And it's a huge cause of fetal death. So thankfully in the UK, after years of lobbying, I hear you about the years of lobbying, we managed to get midwives to say that they would routinely ask every woman when she came to her first appointment, how is your relationship? You know, are you safe at home? Not, are you suffering domestic abuse? Because like Shalini said, people don't think like that. They're not like, oh, I'm suffering domestic abuse, I must go and get help. People don't think like that. The much better things to ask is, do you feel safe? Are you able to say how you feel in a home setting? Is anyone frightening you? And those are much better questions because people relate to them and they understand what that might mean. The other thing that we're heavily involved in the UK is that every time we have a murder in this country, which is horrific, but we have a process called a domestic homicide review, and we review those cases to try and identify what we could have done differently to honour the loss of those lives, you know. And routinely what comes up is that loads of people knew about this. The neighbours knew, family members knew, friends knew, but they didn't know what to do about it. They felt it was a private issue. If I do something, I'm going to make it worse. In some cases, people give people ultimatums, you know, either leave them or I'm not going to be in your life anymore. But if you do that, you're playing straight into the perpetrator's hands, because they're like, excellent, you've got nowhere to go now. I've got complete control over you. So the best thing to do, if you've ever got a loved one or a family member, is to say, look, I love you, and it's really hard to watch you be hurt. So I can't be around as much as I want to be, because it's hard to watch that. But I love you, and if you ever need me, I'm here for you, you know, and leave that door open, because on average it takes 7 or 8 times to leave before you leave for good. And there are so many reasons for that, and economic abuse being one of the main issues. You know, how do you divorce? What's your community going to think? What are your family, friends? It's just so complicated to try and then even once you leave, where are you going to go? Who's going to pay your rent? Who's going to do, you know, where? And people that don't work in this don't see how difficult it's like. Trying to leave is like literally jumping through burning hoops of fire in terms of the obstruction that's put in place. And it's all of our job to try and think innovatively about how we can change that in order to facilitate people to leave safely, because 76% of murders in this country are committed at the point of leaving. That is huge in terms of a risk factor, right? So the worst advice you can give to someone is just leave, because they'll be killed. So you have to say, how are you going to leave? And rather than saying, why doesn't she leave? What we should really be asking is, why doesn't he stop abusing? And it's to turn it on its head. So I'm going to quiet now.
Amazing.
I think that's my 10 minutes up, and I'll share the Standing Together website so that you can see, because there's so much more that we do in the terms of communities as well.
Alison, before you move to the questions, I just want to, a thought that came. Can I share that, please?
Yes.
So you know, you're so right, Guddy, when you say, at least in India, we see that a lot of women want to come out of those relationships. So they've realized that there's a problem, and it's not that they will get killed here, because it's not that easy to kill somebody here, right? The population is so large that, you know, there are people all around you at all given times. But the biggest challenge with them is to say, where do they go? Where do they go? They don't have a home. We don't have shelter homes like it is in the West. They are not there. A lot of times the families push them back. They will come to the family. The family has its own challenges. Either the parents don't have a home of their own, they are living with a son or a daughter, or the siblings have their own challenges that are there. Economics plays a huge role, and they just don't know where to go. So I've experienced that a lot with women to say. So the option is not to leave home, but the option is, at least in India, is to say, how can I equip myself better that I can either change the situation a little, or, so it's all to do with equipping yourself, because the other options are very, very few in India. Very few. And I had another question of Tamar. Tamar, where do you get your funding from?
Yes, thank you. I wanted also to remark to what Guddy said, and then I will answer you, Shalini. First of all, thank you very much, Guddy. You are really good. And what you said, it's exactly the same in Israel. You know, I always say to my workers, never ask a woman, why it took you so long? Because in average, it takes a woman 10 years, in average, some more, to leave a violent home. And I always say it's difficult. It's more difficult to live than to stay, because to make a change, it's difficult, period. And if so many years the husband told you that you're stupid and you cannot stay alone and you are nothing without him, you think it's true, and you cannot imagine yourself out of the violent home. And also the most dangerous point is the point of living. Also in Israel, the murders of the women are because or after, just after the living, or she just said that she wants to divorce. It's very, very dangerous place. And I want to add another fact, that half of the women that are already gone to the shelters, they are out, they are going back to the violent husband. And you ask them, why do you do it? It's not logical. And they say, I'm dependent on him, especially economically. I have nowhere to go. I don't have how to provide for myself. And this is horrible. After they're going out, they're going in again. This is horrible. This is exactly what we do. We want to break the vicious circle, the circle that combine together violence and money. If you are economic independent, you will not get into violent relationship. And if you got to this relationship, more easily you will go out. So thank you very much. And for your question, Shalini, we are an NGO, so we are especially lean on donation from foundation, especially in the States, but also Israeli foundation. Also private people donate to us, companies. We have also self-providing sources. We have a boutique for bridal dresses. In Israel, it's very expensive. A dress like this usually cost, I would say in euros, at least 3,000 euro a dress, a wedding dress. And we get it as donation from brides or from the designers, and we sell it
resell them
in 10% of the original price. We have 1,000 dresses. We sell them and we raise money, and we are doing concerts and, you know, like
fundraising events.
Yes, yeah. Events. And the government 1 year ago decided also to support us in 40% of our budget, which it's a lot. And it allows us to spread ourselves all over Israel. So this is, and if you want to know exact names and resources, no, you can
go. That's all that I want.
It's all transparent. It's in our website, which is also in English. Go there and you find all the names.
Thank you.
It's not a secret.
I was going to say, in terms of answering two of your questions, so in terms of where to go, and this is like a stretch, but I think the thing that I've learned in the last year, we've been piloting something called the whole housing approach, which doesn't just look at refuge and shelter, it looks at all of the different things, and you can find it on the website. But one of the most powerful things that we found, if you're getting donations, what really helps women, and this is about economic, to lead, is money, is access to cash, right? And so small grants. So we call it flexible funding, right? And if I could do a redo of what we've done in this country, I would put more emphasis on trusting women to know what they need that money for, because actually putting someone in a refuge or shelter costs about £21,000 a year. Whereas if that woman just needs support to get into her own private rented sector money, which is £3,000, I don't know, for 3 months, and then she could be helped to get a job to sustain that tenancy, that's not just cheaper for the government, it's also what she wants. So why aren't we being more flexible around meeting the needs of that person and really truly listening? Obviously the context is very different in India and Israel, so I'm not very, very different, but these are just ideas that I'm throwing out there and I don't know how they would work, but I'd love to continue the conversation. And the thing about why go back from refuge and shelter, it's much bigger than that as well. Being in a refuge or shelter when you've given up your whole life to sit where you don't know anyone and you're bunged into this environment that you never expected you'd be in, actually lots of people wouldn't like that. And like Shalini very, very eloquently said at the start, that being in a domestic abuse situation is like a roller coaster. They're not always monsters. They're also the love of your life, charming, the father of your children, love you, I'll come back, you know, I'll never do it again, give you all the promises. So you could still be in love with them when you leave. And that's what people find difficult to talk about, the fact that you loved this monster, but they're not always monsters. So that is, in terms of breaking that cycle, couldn't agree with that more. There's so much work that has to be done in that space.
Guddy, if I just add to what you said, I've also experienced, especially from a lot of women that have gone through this and they want to go back, is they say that they've gotten used to a certain lifestyle, a certain ease that that house brings to that individual. And uprooting yourself from there and being dependent on either a family member or in a refuge is very different. So they feel that when they measure the two to say what is better for them in the long run, they feel it is better. Surprisingly, this came as a surprise to me, but they say that they feel better to be in that abusive relationship, but having a home of their own, something that they call their own, than being either at a refuge or outside that place. So that's, again, as I always say, only the person knows what is right for them. We can only create awareness, we can equip them, we can show them various channels that are available to them. But finally, the individual will know what works right for them. And you're so right. I like the idea to say we rather give them that money to do what you can with that rather than provide in different ways in which we think is right for them.
Yeah. Thank you guys. I'm so glad this is just sparking this great conversation, which, I definitely don't want to derail us at all, but I do have some questions about, I guess, those of us who are on the outside maybe and don't know the signs or the signals. Do you have some suggestions on, what are some of the things that we can look for? And then, of course, then that leads into then what do we do in a safe way? But Tamar, I see you shaking your head. Maybe you can, what should we look for in our family, our friends, our coworkers to help spot these and identify them so that we can provide some help?
Yes, thank you. You know that we are now conducting a new project, which is only 1 year, of lectures and workshop to professionals to identify signs and where to refer the woman. And when I'm talking about professional, I'm talking about also women that are doing cosmetic treatment and hairdressers, that they see normative women, that violence is getting to the high level and to everyone. So they see women all the time, and how to identify. And when you are saying signs, I'm not talking about physical abuse, because physical you see. When you ask people from the public, what is a women victim of violence for you? What is the first association? Most of the people will say a woman with a punch in her eye. This is easy, it's horrible, but it's easy to identify. I'm talking about the quiet signs, or we call them the blue signs in your bank account. That if you take the word violence and you put instead of this word, the word control. If there is a massive control on one side, on one partner, on the other, usually it's a man on the woman, this is abusive relationship. If he calls you 10 times an hour, some of the women will say, look how he loves me, he cannot be 1 minute without me. No, it's not logic, it's he envy too much. If he says all the time, with whom you talk, why did you look at him? No, it doesn't mean he loves you. It means that he wants to control you, to make you part of his body. And this is why to leave this man is very dangerous, because when a woman leave him, he feels that his hand leave him, part of his body leave him. Yes, this is why these men think that the woman is part of their body, it's part of them. Other signs I always say to women, some of my friends, my good friends, tell me, my husband runs the bank account. He's better in this. I'm not good in economic issues. And I always say, tell me, do you have application in your phone that you can go into the bank account and look? Don't make the the actions, just look. Can you look in your bank account? If your husband say, no, I'm the only one that look, why? Why does he want to hide? So do make the decision together, big decision, make together. If you want to make the decision alone, it's a bad sign. Also, if he says, give me the credit card and I will give you cash and you will report to me. No, you don't have to report. Why? You are a child that he give you pocket money? Marriage should be equal. We don't get these answers. And always check the bank account. We also recommend to have your own bank account, that you will not make debts on the bank account. So when I see a woman that use only cash, that say that she has to report, that she's afraid, even if she is not abusive, violent husbands are not all the time violent, but you see that she's terrorized, she's stressed, she's always intense. What will happen? Then you have your sign. And I agree with Guddy a lot. You can suggest, you can say, look, you don't have to stay in this situation. Look, there are organizations you can go to, but you can never push her. You can never decide for her, because the first thing that a woman victim of violence is lack of is control of their life, of her life. So this is the first thing that I would return to her, the control of her life and to decide for her life.
Alison, just to add to what Tamar said, at workplace, especially if you're at workplace and you see women around, a good way to look at it is to say somebody who was a good worker, why is suddenly becoming very either distracted, is making a lot of mistakes suddenly, because that means is not able to concentrate, something is bothering them. Or sometimes you feel they start becoming very quiet, they start going in a shell. Somebody who was nice, bubbly, cheerful, would, play around, and you see that something's happening, that they're getting into a shell. It's a good time at that time to actually reach out, and if you're not equipped to reach out, ask somebody within the organization who has the skills to reach out, to say, is everything okay? And it's not just once that they will open up, because it is very, very difficult. A lot of women who are at workplace worry about the perception about them. They will worry about to say, will it hamper my career if somebody comes to know that I'm abused? So you have to have that consistent conversation, observe them, be around them, give them that reassurance to say, this is a safe place. You can voice what you want to say without any repercussions to your career or anything. So you can start observing. You do see that they start dropping things. I have noticed that, suddenly their hands are a little shaky. So there are these little signs that you can start looking at and observing. Once you get a little aware about it, you start noticing them around you. And those are generally not the ones that would be like everybody saying. A lot of women go through emotional violence more than anything else. They're just told that they are not good enough, and they start believing in that, and then it's a spiral downwards. So these are the things to look for. And I do agree. Sadly, we always feel that, violence or domestic abuse or anything of that nature is a very private thing. We don't need to intervene. But I think it is completely wrong. And that's one area that we as a group of women are focusing on, to say that no, it is not a private affair. Yes, the final decision of what to do with this resides with the woman who is the person there, the victim there. But we can help in our own ways. And like both of them said, just first of all is just giving a listening ear to the person, just reassuring that we are there with you. You can reach out, you can talk to somebody. That's a very, very big thing. Interestingly, in India, I don't know about the rest of the countries, but in India, there are these myths that we are trying to now kind of unshackle, to say that these don't hold true. So the first is, India is considered to be the spiritual capital of the world, right? So everything goes back to praying. So the first thing that everybody around, parents and everybody, would tell you is pray and things will be fine. You start praying and God will intervene. He will make things fine for you. That doesn't happen. you have to finally do something on your own. Another thing that you hear, myth is to say, don't worry, once there's going to be a child, things will work out between the family. The children will bring in, not realizing that that's the worst thing that you can do. You are in a toxic relationship, in a toxic environment, and then you bring that child, you're perpetuating and ruining another human life right through, because the scars that that person is going to live with will never go. So you hear this as well, to say, just pray. And another thing that you hear in India is to say that, our culture doesn't support divorce and all, so please don't go get into a divorce. Manage it. Just manage it. You will be able to manage. Just please him a little more. Please him every which way. Please him sexually. Do more things for him. Be a better wife, and things will work out for you. So these are actually very wrong advice to give. The advice should be to say, seek a counselor. Go meet somebody who can, professionally is equipped to help you as to what direction you should take. So that's what we should be saying. Or we should be telling to say, okay, can parents come and sit down? Once the abuser knows that there are others who are aware of it, it does lessen a bit. Because there is that little fear that comes in to say that if I do something, there are others who would come. So if you involve the family, if you involve professional help, if you involve law, law is the last resort people go to, because coming out of that, making that call to the police is not an easy one. That is when you've kind of taken a decision, this is not going to go anywhere. But sometimes it's good to do this at an early stage rather than at a later stage.
Yeah, thank you. That's super insightful. And I really like your, how you were talking about also noticing this at work, because I think that is where you see people a lot of the time. And I know I've missed signs and, also probably have not wanted to ask the question, but I think how you said it as well, just, are you okay? Is everything okay? Right? That doesn't have to be so specific. It can be quite open, and then they can, and if you ask it on a regular basis, then, hopefully they will be more open to share.
So something that I tried that worked brilliantly is I would just make 2 cups of coffee and go across to the person, give that cup of coffee and say, come, let's have coffee together.
Yeah, yeah.
No, you just do that. You take them into a room, you just have a normal chat, and they just feel so rich. Sometimes they may not open up, but you can see it in the eyes that there is some trauma that they are going through.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. Thank you. I know, Guddy, we talked a little bit before when we had some initial discussions around, there's a lot of these like signs, these hand signs that sometimes that people are doing, or I know, Tamar, I know there's some digital tools that people can use to actually report domestic violence, but sometimes you said that can actually even be more dangerous. And so I was just wondering if you can give a little bit of insight on, how do we, maybe beyond just this initial listening and being there and open for people, but are there other ways that we can flag this to the community, to the authorities, but in a way that's safe for them? Or do we really have to let them decide? I'm curious about this whole space of what do we do, right? Once we've identified it, what do we do?
Okay, so the conversation we had was, it's based on, there's always a lot of initiatives which often sometimes even survivors come up with themselves to say, oh, and there was one that went viral, which was the idea of putting a black dot in the middle of your palm. Some of you may have seen that. And then that was a way of signifying to people that you needed help. And it came directly from a survivor. So that, everyone obviously wanted to respect that and all the rest of it. But in the UK, the conversations we then had to have is the reason that can be counterproductive is if all GPs, doctors and teachers and all of that are waiting to see a sign, it almost gives them an excuse not to ask. Whereas what we need is everyone to be asking if everyone's okay, not waiting for somebody themselves. So it's on the survivor and the victim to then identify themselves as, I need help. And I think that's just my opinion. It's really divisive in terms of the debate, but I don't think we should be putting the onus on the survivor or the victim to do something to make her. I think we as a collective have to get to a space where everyone is curious enough, the neighbours, the person that, do you see what I mean? that everyone's saying, oh, I've noticed something. And what you both described really well is all we're looking for is a real change in behaviour. And that could be anything. You know, when you've known someone, you see that. And in children, their behaviour is also quite interesting because it can be the polar, it can be completely different. They either start performing even better at school because they don't want to go home. So they become A-star students overnight and they're asking for it. Or they get distracted, they start truanting. So the thing with domestic abuse is it could be either eye of the side of the spectrum. So you just need to be looking out for any kind of change in behaviour that doesn't sit right. And then, like Shalini said, if you just ask if you're okay, it might not be domestic abuse. It could be that they're worried they're going to lose their job and there's some other, and it's not anything as, but you've started the conversation. And then in terms of like what you would do in that space, is the best thing is actually listen, not talk at people. And that's a hard thing to learn as a professional, because I remember even myself, I hated uncomfortable silences, so I try and fill them. But the survivor needs space and time to trust you and to be able to tell their story, maybe for the first time out loud. So what we think is listening probably isn't listening. We have to really actively hear that person. And then I think the best thing that you can do as somebody that isn't a professional in this I don't know the answers, but I do know there are these specialist services that you can speak to that are fully trained. Why don't we just look on the internet, find out what the local service is, and I'll make that call with you. We'll call that person together, because like Shalini said, the hardest thing for someone to do is pick up the call, pick up the phone and say out loud, the person that I love, the father of my children, is hurting me. Whereas if they can do that supported with another woman by their side, because this is all about sisterhood, that transition, that step is much easier to bear. And so that's what I would do. If I would say, let's have a look. Do you know that domestic abuse is much more than just physical? It's financial, it's economic, and give them a bit of a training session at the same time, and then refer them on to the local specialist service if there is one. And that's the other problem. In some areas there aren't those because we don't have the funding. That's a whole other question. But yeah.
Thank you. That's super helpful. Look like Shalini, did you want to add something or?
No.
Yes, I want to add, we in Women's Spirit, we are not emergency center. I call our action as a physiotherapy, because we are the rehabilitation. Yes, after the woman went out of the violent circle, we are doing the long process of the economic and occupational empowerment. And we have a law, our policy is that the woman has to make the first call. Many women are being referred by social workers or friends, colleagues, and they call us and we say, okay, thank you for all the details you gave me, but now tell this Juliet to call us. She has to make the first step because she has to have motivation. Our process is a hard one, you know? She has homework. She has to be cognitive free. We are not therapy. We are not emotional therapy. We recommend to the women that come to us to be in therapy in the parallel time that they will have strength to go through our process. And what Guddy just said, that she recommended to a person to say to the woman, victim of violence, let's call together. Just a few days ago, the secretary was out and I picked one of the phones and there was a lady and she says, I'm here at work and I have a friend here and she always tells me about her husband and she's here, she's near me. Now I want you to listen. And I said, what's your friend name? She told me the name. Let's say it was Josephine, a nickname, no, how do you say, another name, it's not the real name. And I said, can you put me on speaker? she put on speaker and I said, Josephine, do you hear me? She says, yes. And I had, Josephine, do you want to call us? And she says, yes. And then the conversation started. And I said, Josephine, I want you to say in your own voice, what is happening? You see, so this is the answer for your question. It's very frustrating to see sometimes a woman suffering so much. And a friend is telling her, you can stop this, you can go to places, they will help you. And she's afraid and she doesn't make the first step. And you see it and you are stressed. You want this a bad situation to stop, but you can never do instead of her. This is the sad truth. You cannot, because even if she come and you brought her, she will not cooperate. She has, the woman, there is one phase that must occur, the phase of decision. The woman has to decide she wants to change. She doesn't know how, she doesn't know nothing. She decides. Think about yourself on any change, even to lose weight, to change work, to go to learn, many changes that are not connected to trauma, to stop, to quit smoking. Every change in life, the first phase is to decide. To decide. You cannot, and if you don't decide, someone decide for you, it will not last.
Yeah, I did mean with consent. I'm not saying that we call people without their consent.
Yes.
Like that's not what I meant. But the other thing, there is a caveat for that though. The one thing I would say, if you are concerned in this country about the children, you have to.
Yes, and in Israel.
So even if you're in a situation and they start disclosing that the children are impacted, and you're right, of course it's got to be that person's decision.
Yes, in Israel
sometimes if you think they might die, or if there's a significant risk of harm to someone else or the children, then you don't wait for them to decide. So and that's why it needs a professional, right? Because a friend or someone that's not trained in this wouldn't know.
Yes, exactly. The three conditions in Israel. One, if you are under 18. Second, 4 conditions. First, if you are under 18. Second, if you are mental retarded or mental ill, it means that you don't have ability to choose between right and wrong. The third is if you are going to make suicide, so I have to report him, or you are going to hurt other people. If I will hear that someone is going to do, I have to report even without his consent, of course, yes.
So there's a very interesting ad campaign that had come out in India on domestic violence, but that was primarily on physical abuse that had come out. So it's the same thing, to say that you just can't be a bystander ever. You know, if the neighbors are there. Very, very interesting, and it was very effective. I really wish they would run it all the time. Was that if you hear sounds coming from your neighbor's home, which gives you a sense that the woman is being beaten, all you do is just go ring the bell. Just ring the bell 2-3 times and come back to your home, so that they know that somebody is listening. You know, there are people around that are aware. So it was called Bell Bajao, which means ring the bell. And it really did help, because for a second there's a pause. And the minute there is that one pause that happens, things at least reduce. At least in that moment they reduce. It doesn't mean that it will go away. That doesn't happen. One interesting question that I have, Alison, with your permission, if I can ask. I know there are 2 experts here and I'm not from that, but it has always interested and intrigued me. Have you people seen, when you worked with a lot of these victims, where the abuser has actually changed? Is there something that can be done? Like you said, somebody said, I think Guddy, you said, that can we change the conversation from the victim to the abuser, to say what can, you know, put the responsibility there. But have you seen that it happens? And if it does, what is it that helps them change?
So yeah. So, but it's very few and far between is the answer. So in the UK, we have perpetrator programs, that's what they're called, or change modification programs. And they're 52 weeks long, so they're really long and in depth. And the reason that people abuse is, as you've highlighted, the power and control, but it's also about entitlement. So within those courses, it basically takes away all of those excuses. So the things like, oh, I was drunk, I was stressed. I've been drunk before. I'll say that to all of you. I've been stressed before. I don't hurt people. That's an active choice. Okay. And what you have to do is shift the responsibility back onto the perpetrator to challenge and change those excuses that they've internalized to justify their own behavior, so they take responsibility. Now, there's only been one evaluation of the programs in the UK, and through that evaluation, it demonstrated with this intervention that there was definitely a decrease or cessation or a stop in physical and sexual violence, but not necessarily in emotional and psychological. And so it's a success, but you see, and then the only other direct experience I've ever had, because I was so emotionally, I never had spoken to a woman who'd ever told me, do you know what, my husband actually changed, this happened, and apart from one. And I was really grateful that she came and told me at the end of a training session. And she was like, I know what you said about perpetrators program, but I want to share with you that he basically pushed her in the road for her to die, and grabbed her 5-year-old child at the same time to kidnap. And she passed out, and she woke up and she didn't know where her 5-year-old child was. She was in hospital. He was imprisoned for that because there was a lot of evidence for what happened. And whilst he was in prison, he was rehabilitated in his own way. And when he came out, her report to me was that he was a completely changed man. And now he has a relationship with his daughter. They have a good relationship. They're not together, but they've worked through it. But that's the only one I've heard. So it's,
Otherwise it doesn't.
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. And I mean, with seeing this rise during COVID, I'm also curious, because Tamar, we also had a conversation about this, that very rarely do they change. And I'm wondering if there's any difference between kind of nipping it in the bud, if it's something new that's come up, or if this is many years of systemic violence. Like, have you seen any kind of a difference that, okay, COVID has been an extremely stressful situation and it's bringing out the worst in some people? If you stop it earlier, is there a higher likelihood? I don't know if I'm framing this question well, but do you understand kind of what I'm saying? If domestic abuse has been around forever, but we've seen this huge increase. Do you think that—
You are talking about the corona? I didn't understand.
Yeah,
no.
Exactly.
So Alison, to respond to your query, just my perspective, I have seen that an abuser with one wife, and actually maybe after a divorce and then has a second person, a second marriage or whatever, is not abusive many times. So it's not that, so there is a way, I think, where you can nip it in the bud, if I say so, which is when maybe you don't let the person abuse you in the initial period of your relationship. If you make certain things very clear, or you disengage with the person right there and then they understand to say that this person I cannot control. I cannot, have that power over this person, and they'll start looking for somebody else to do that. But at least you will not be a prey to their, that's my view, but I don't know, these professionals maybe have a better response to that.
See, I don't agree with that, because I think it gives the impression that if you're being abused, that it's somehow you're accountable for it. So in here, we would see that as blaming the person, because what perpetrators are very, very capable of doing, and it's all about manipulation, it's almost like grooming. So they are your knight in shining armor. They are wonderful. They buy you present, and you fall in love with them. And it's not that they just turn around and punch you in the face and that's it. They make you fall in love with them over a long period of time, drip, 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 drip. And then it's the occasional put down. It's a little shove. It's you look fat in that dress, and you don't put the flags together. Maybe you haven't had relationships, or you've never had it. And I think it all starts, actually, if we want, in education in schools with young people. So we need to teach boys to be feminists and understand, you know, and to respect women. We need to, and we also need to, like you said, Shalini, talk to get women about their self-worth and value. You know, look at children's books and the difference between what we tell boys that they can be and what we tell women they can be. Women, we tell them they should get married and have children, and boys can be astronauts and this and that, and why, like, you know. So it starts from tiny, and then society fuels that, and then it's like rape survivors. We put a lot of onus on women to stop themselves being raped. I don't get drunk, don't wear that dress, make sure you tell your mates where you're going, blah 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 blah. That is totally wrong. We're not at fault for being raped. Perpetrators rape us. You see what I mean? And that's what we need to stop. If we don't, we will always, the responsibility will remain on women, and that's where we go wrong. That's why we're not stopping things. That's how I feel about it.
So, you know, I get invited to talk to a lot of young professional women that have just kind of graduated from business schools, are joining career, you know, getting into their first jobs. And there's something that I say to them always, and I would like to say that for whoever's listening in here, is that the biggest decision that a woman needs to make in her life is on choosing the right partner. There can be no bigger decision that a girl has to make in her life if she decides to marry, is to say, who should be my life partner? And when they choose that life partner, they should take this decision exactly like you are taking a project that you have to be successful in. So it has to be over a longish period of time, where you should actually observe them, observe the person, to say, how do they behave with the elderly, with the children, with the disadvantaged group. In India, we have, you know, you have a lot of people with poverty. How do they behave with them? What are their natural instincts? How do they behave with children? How are they with children? How are they with people with disability? Observe these things in them very, very carefully, to say, what are their reactions to that? That's one piece. The second piece that I always say to them is, a lot of times, the initial thing that begins with men is they're just poking fun at you. So it's just out of fun. You think that they are teasing you. They are just kind of, you know, saying things. But that meanness slowly gets down to all this emotional abuse that is there. So the minute you feel that there is that little twinge in your heart where you came back thinking to say, this was, you know, he may have said it in a teasing manner, but it has hurt me. Hold it right there. Have that conversation with that individual. If you're thinking of a long-term relationship with that person, to say, listen, you cannot say this to me next time. This is beyond what I will accept. So when you start putting in your communication, is so clear to say that these are the things that are a no-no. A lot of times when I go visit families, I find it very interesting as to how the father and the children will be making fun of the mother all the time. Oh, your mother does that. The children will add on and say, your mom does that. Interestingly, it is never on the positive side. It's all the negative. Mom is exaggerating. Mom doesn't do this right. Mom, and the wife is laughing and saying, yeah, they tease me. Why can't they tease you with something positive? So once you start as a mother, as a wife, and you start putting your foot down to say, you want to say something, say to me about positive. Tell me what is positive, or tell me what can I do better, but I don't want to hear a negative comment about me. You know, these things over a period of time get into this. So there are these, as I always put in, to say, there are these filters that you can put in the relationship to make it a healthier one.
Yeah, makes sense. I just wanted to see if there's anyone on the panel and in the chat that has a question. I, of course, have more questions, but just want to open it up and see if there are any. I've seen a lot of great conversation and comments, but so far I don't think I've seen any specific questions for the panel.
You asked about the corona that we
yeah, I was
corona influence
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering if you, I guess some of it is I wonder if it's just bringing out something that was already there, or these could be isolated cases that can be stopped. I guess that was kind of my question I was leaning towards.
Okay, I can say in Israel what we see, that of course violence was here and before the corona, and unfortunately it will be after the corona. But what we see in the corona, I can parallel to this holidays. And I will explain why, because it's not nice like holidays, but in Israel, we have twice a year, in October and in April, two big holidays. It's called Sukkot and Pesach. Pesach is like Pascha, you say, in the Christianity. It's Pascha? No? In April. And
I think Easter, it's around Easter, Passover. Easter and Passover, yeah.
Easter, we say in Hebrew, Pascha is the holiday of Christian. Easter, yes. So we have a week of holiday that all the family are together. And what happened after this week, we get a lot of phone calls because only staying together, it's stressful. Because during the ordinary day life, everybody go to work. You don't see your partner most of the day. So the being together is less. And if it's less, so the violence is less. So after holidays, we have, and the emergency center, they get a lot of phone calls. So the corona was like this Easter. Yes, because it was everybody together. In Israel, we had a month that there was a quarantine. We couldn't go out. 100 meters from the house you could go. Only to the supermarket to buy grocery and go back, not to work. And you know what this doing to families of violence? It's being together first. Second, the children didn't go to school, a lot of stress. Third is the physical fear that you will get corona, yes, that you will get this disease. And the fourth is the economic stress, because many of the people were fired, were going on leave. And in Israel, it's a leave without payment. You are in the house waiting. And it's a very stressful. So the violence immediately go up to the emergency centers. After the first months of the quarantine, it raises 10 times. To us, only 4 times double, 300%, only because we are not crisis, but still women want to address us. And
is there any difference in how you would address, I guess?
Yeah, exactly.
This is after vacation or quarantine, yeah.
Yeah, this is my next sentence. I wanted to say that our policy, we say that we teach the women how to be independent. We give them, I don't know, how do you call it, that you fish the fish,
a fishing rod, yeah.
A fishing rod, but we don't give the fish.
Right.
We are teaching them, we give them scholarship to learn profession, but we don't give them a check. Mm-hmm. But in the corona time, we changed our policy. We were walking to we call them participant, not clients. Participant is an equal term because she participated in her program. We went to their houses and brought food boxes because they came to a horrible state, Maslow pyramid. The basic needs, they don't have, they were fired. They didn't have how to pay rent. So we help in the basic needs. Also, we help them to fill all the forms to the national insurance until they got the payment they are entitled to. And a lot of phone calls that we make reaching out. We phone them, how are you? Even to quiet women that didn't call us and say they are in crisis. to see how are they and to support them. A lot of emotional support, very intensive in this hard time.
Yeah, I'm seeing a couple. Thank you so much, Tamar. I'm also seeing Shalini and Guddy. You also put some things in the chat around reaching out, asking how people are doing, and then now it's going so fast. Emergency accommodation nationally. Well, so we're just at the end of our time. We only have the last minute. I did want to say, Shivangi, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to say. So Shivangi is the founder of Thrive with Mentoring, which is the the overarching organization for SheThrives. So I just wanted to give you a second if you wanted to say anything, and then just give a big thank you to everyone who's participated.
Thank you so much. It's been phenomenal. I managed to attend, most of it. I was a few minutes late. Thank you so much. I think for me, it has been very insightful to look at this issue from different cultures and different perspectives. I think Shalini, Tamar, Guddy, you all brought in such a rich set of data and resources that are available. And what we realized, and I'm having this conversation now with the team, that we should have probably gone live on Facebook with this session, because this is not necessarily just for SheThrives participants. I think this is for everybody. So we are going to now, if you all agree, we will, of course, put it through all our channels so that it's available to the thousands of women that we have access to and, that use our platform. And Alison, you've done a phenomenal job of, putting this and curating this together. And as you said, Guddy, this probably is the first conversation, and we really need to see how we can, go a bit deeper and support, especially with that element around emotional abuse, economic abuse. Because I am a bit surprised that out of the lots of SheThrives participants that are very interested in other sessions, not too many have attended the domestic violence panel. And I feel that's because there is, like I would think myself before getting educated, that this is not something that's relevant for me. And I think it's really about awareness, and it's really about education. So thank you so much for your time. I think we all need this, and our friends need it, and we'll do our best to try and bring this to as many women as we can.
Shivangi, hi.
Thank you.
Shivangi, are you open to one last question?
Sure.
Yeah, I have shared one question. Could you just take a look at it and somebody answer that?
Lalita has a question for you, Alison.
I've see about choosing the right partner, the right life partner. So I think this is Shivangi, based on the comment that you made.
I think she said something Shalini said, right? Which I thought was really amazing.
Yeah.
Shalini said that choosing a real life partner, that actually starts the whole process, right? And
I see.
I started reflecting on my own choices, of choosing a life partner, and it's interesting. And I thought, wow, maybe it should become a part of education. And it's not just for women. I think even the men should choose, the right life partner. I don't think this is a female-oriented thing, but I think everything that you have said, all three of you during the panel, that everything starts when we are so young, and there's so much messaging that we are integrating invisibly, and that we don't even question, that we don't even wonder if there is another way to live. And I can see the question that you have asked, Lalita, they're saying that people and partners can change, and circumstances like loss of jobs can bring about the change, or it could be substance addiction. I mean, we've heard that addiction rates have increased dramatically during quarantine. So her question is, how does one handle a partner or a spouse who is not the same person you married or first lived with? So yeah, I think maybe that's something for you, Shalini, because you married another person and the person changed. You changed too, probably, but
yeah, I was about to say, Shivangi, you said that. I said, maybe you've also changed, right? We've all changed. We all change as we grow, as our experiences shape us. We all change. And yes, maybe the only thing that you can do is you can have those conversations. So if the person is changing for the better, is changing for the good, and we change both ways. We change for the better, and we also change for the worse. Both go hand in hand. It's not just one way. have those conversations and encourage the spouse to say, this is what I like about you. This is, I've always said this to us. The one relationship where we need to invest time is with your spouse. And that's the relationship that we least spend time and effort in. So if your spouse is changing and he or she would change, the best is to have those periodic conversations, go out together, do something together, and have that to say, this is what I like, this is what I not like. And hear from the other person as well. What is it that he's liking about you that you're changing, and what he's not liking about you? It's a mutual feedback sessions that you need to have without calling them that. But these are joint sessions that you do it in a lively environment. Just eating and drinking out is not what is what keeps a relationship going. No, that's just a formality. I've seen so many couples that go out at restaurants, and I find it so hilarious. Both of them would be sitting across the table, both on their phones, right? That's the time you have those conversations. Think through before you're going for it. Even if you have to start that conversation, think through to say, in today's dinner, I am going to bring about these 2 or 3 things on, whether it is related to children, whether it is related to home, whether it is related to yourself, whether it is related to your relationship or your husband's relationship with the external world, whether it is around your career. Pick up all these important facets of your life that are there, and in each dinner that you go out to, bring it nicely in a nice positive manner so that you work at that. And slowly the spouse also learns this, to say, oh, when we are going out, they start preparing to say, oh, so there's going to be one thing that's going to come out over this dinner, I better be prepared. We get to know each other so well when you're living together day in, day out. You have to use these opportunities, and that's what I call equipping yourself. Have that confidence in yourself to say, I am the best thing that has happened to this individual. He's the best thing that has happened to me as an individual. How can we make it work? If it's in the right trajectory, if it's already in the abusive relationship, then I would only recommend that you seek professional help and disengage yourself, because it is very difficult for the individual to change. And we've heard that again and again from everybody, to say that they don't change. And why should they? They are in that position of power. They are in the position where they're getting everything out of this. What's the need to change? Change only happens when it's going to cause you some kind of damage. And if it is not going to, you won't change.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as we've seen, this is just the beginning of, I think, a lot of really deep conversations that we need to continue to have. So I just want to, again, say a huge thank you. Guddy had to leave already. Thank you, Shalini. Thank you, Tamar. Thank you, Shivangi. It's been, and Asha for all the background support. We really appreciate it. It's been an amazing session, and just the beginning. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.